and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's kind of surprised that they lost their CEO.
Who did?
County.
Oh, they're gonna fire her.
She's gone.
Well, I know they're gonna fire her.
Hey, Stacy, are you ready?
That's what Crystal, man.
I am.
About to ask you. Can you take roll call, please?
Sure. Director Davidson?
Here.
Director Stump?
Present.
President Ratterman?
Here?
Director Dean?
Here.
Director Dooley?
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. Public comment, item 2 on our agenda. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized item. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Any public comment today? Mr. Duncan?
Yeah, when I started preparing for this meeting, I noticed in your agenda you have 3 meetings starting next week for the purposes of proceeding with the hiring of a general manager. And the start of that process will be about 22 days prior to an election that could change up to 80% of the board that's sitting up there. That if you did, in fact, proceed in hiring a new general manager at this point in time, so close to an election, I think it would show somewhat disdain for the ratepayers that you're supposed to be representing. The reason is actually quite simple. If you should offer a contract and hire somebody in the next few weeks, and the new board takes over and says, that's not the guy we want, then that board might feel obligated to go ahead and get rid of that guy and go through another hiring process, which would just be another bucket of ratepayer money right down the old toilet. So I would recommend and ask you to please cease and desist until after the new board sits.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment? Bertha?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Bertha Underhill, Camp Connell. I have
Did you see this on the claim summary?
similar thoughts to Ken about choosing the general manager by this board. However, one of the things that I was a little curious about is the fact that you're going to have 3 closed sessions at different locations. And I'm curious to know how much that's going to cost CCWD ratepayers. You have a brand new building. Why can't you have the meetings here? Since they are closed session, no one else is going to be in attendance except the CCWD staff. So I'm saying, save that money. The other thing that I'm asking is something I brought up at the Finance Committee meeting. We have never seen final figures on this building. So what's holding it up, and when can I expect some figures? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Item number 3, the following items are expected to be routine, non-controversial. Items will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member may request that any item be removed for later discussion. 3A, approval of minutes for the board meetings of September 17th and September 19th, 2014. 3B, ratify claim summary number 511, secretarial fund in the amount of $1,965,401.22 for September 2014. It's Jeff Meyer, Director of Administrative Services. And item 3C, approve cancellation of November 26th and December 24th, 2014 board meetings. Larry Diamond, Interim General Manager.
Move for acceptance.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any public comment on this item?
I have a question. I noticed that on our future meetings, we don't have one scheduled for the second meeting for this month. And is there a reason for that? Because that's not one of them that's been canceled. Or normally we have 2 regular meetings a month.
I think it was canceled.
You know?
Which month?
This month.
This month? It hasn't been canceled yet, but we may suggest that.
Well, because on our agenda, it doesn't have a second meeting listed for October, a regular meeting.
I see an October 22nd regular board meeting listed.
Page
Oh, yeah.
Page 3 of 3, Dennis?
I grabbed the wrong agenda when I walked out the door.
Okay, yeah, it's my.
Never done that before.
My mistake as well, yeah, it is, and we'll get to that item. Item 11 on our agenda is the next board meetings, and yes, Wednesday, October 22nd, as well as the 3 closed sessions are all listed there.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Okay. Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 5-0. Okay, item 4, bid award, 4A, bid award of construction contract for the Copper Cove Sewer Lift Station number 22, replacement project, CCWD CIP number 15078. And we have our Charles Palmer, our district engineer, carrying the item. Go ahead.
So yes, we've working hard on this project. It's been on the books for a long time, since 2007. We had set plans in 2008, shortly after we completed the lift station, lower cross-country lift station. And so this project is kind of the second phase of that. And we were kind of shying away from it because lower cross-country cost $2 million, and we didn't want to do that again. So we went back to the drawing boards and kind of revamped the plans and cut down on the costs. And that's what we're doing for the past 3 months, and then also put it out to bid on, looks like it was, bid opening was on September 23rd. And so we got a really good price. We had a great bid, a lot of competition on the bid, and so I'm glad to bring this before the board so we can get a project into construction. So we're really pleased with this. So, did any of the board members have any questions on the project?
It's not listed here, but I'd be curious the timeline, when you plan on starting, and what's the anticipated date of completion?
We've given them 300 days to complete it. It's, initially, you go through a phase where you have to order all your materials,
Oh.
And there's some complex electronics involved on the project. This fiberglass wet well is a custom wet well that there's a company in Sacramento that fabricates them. That takes a little time to fabricate and give the shop drawings before you fabricate it. And there's other items like a generator. Some of them they come from back east, so you gotta get the shop drawing approved. It's gotta go through manufacturing. It's just not an item that's sitting on a shelf someplace. So we'd be looking to complete the shop drawing process probably till the end of the year, and then my initial conversation with the contractor is that probably would like to start breaking ground early next year, weather permitting.
Okay. But from the date of the issuance of the contract until completion is 300 days, or you got some wiggle room there?
From the notice to proceed date, so.
I see, okay.
Which, is a little bit flexible. Normally you would like to go ahead and get the notice to proceed issued as soon as you award the contract, but, sometimes we choose to talk to the contractor about it and see if we can reach an agreement with them as far as what the preferred date for the notice to proceed is.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Don.
You mentioned that a lot of this stuff is custom. Is there any way, I'm not an engineer, but is there any way that we can use standard off-the-shelf kind of things to?
It's, maybe I shouldn't use that word exactly. it's, you know, they take a standard product and then they may modify it for your specific project, you know. So even with the motor controls, it's Square D or Schneider Electric will make a standard motor control center. We purchase that motor control center, it gets shipped to Tesco in Sacramento, and then they modify it to suit our project. So
Okay.
it's kind of a off-the-shelf item that's subsequently modified for our project conditions.
So 5 years, 10 years from now, if we have to replace that motor controller, it's not a huge deal?
It's all standard parts, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So, thank you.
Charles, I see we do have the three lowest bidders here. And we did end up with Myers and Son. Have we done work with Myers and Son that you're familiar with in the past?
They're a new company for us. This is the CC Myers that you hear on TV all the time. You know? And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how this works out during construction as far as, you know, they're known to be a company that is really aggressive in their construction set of schedules. So it's going to be interesting to see how that turns out during construction. But I've heard San Joaquin Electric, we've heard good things about them, who's the electrical sub, and this project does have quite a bit of electrical work on it. So our chief electrician, Oliver, worked for San Joaquin Electric for 10 years, so he highly recommends them.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we approve 4A, the bid award for construction contract, Copper Code Lift Station 22.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any public comment on this item?
Yes, I'd like to know, the entire.
Bertha, can you come to the microphone, please? Thanks.
The entire funding for this project is coming from the capital R&R program. And, you know, this project has been on the books for a long time. Have we accumulated any monies for this in the past?
Can I defer to our finance manager?
Thank you, Jeff.
Are those the questions that you have? Okay, I just wanted to make sure I can answer them all. Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board.
Good morning.
The question from Bertha was regarding the funding for this project. It is indeed coming from our capital R&R funding project. As your board will probably remember, earlier this year, the district entered into a loan on both the water and the wastewater side. Since it takes a while for us to accumulate funds to be able to perform these projects, especially a project in this magnitude, we took out that loan. That loan is going to be paying for this project. In response to the question about have we been accumulating funds to be able to do these projects over the years, and the answer is no, we do not have these funds. It does not qualify as an expansion project, so we don't have expansion funds cannot be used for this project. It would basically be coming out of our O&M budget, and we just haven't had the funds to be able to do this project. Are there any further questions regarding the financing aspect?
Thank you very much, Jeff. Any other further public comment on this item? Okay, we got any comments, question of the dais? Any up here? Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? It carries 5-0. Thank you, Charles.
Great, thank you.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
now that I've been given an agenda, which I forgot and left on my desk, I do not see on this, this one I have, it does not have an October 22nd meeting.
There is one.
That's at the very top. I can see it from here.
Yeah.
Very top
Oh.
line.
Okay, out of sequence, I see. I beg your pardon.
Okay. It is out of sequence. We'll get that corrected.
By the 22nd?
Okay, item 5, old business, nothing to report. On to item 6 on our agenda, new business, 6A. Discussion action regarding amending the district's financial management policy Policy number 5.01 in our investment policy. Jeffrey Meyer, Director of Administrative Service.
Good morning again, Mr. President, members of the board. The item before you is a request to amend the district's financial management policy, policy number 5.01, the investment policy. Current policy requires staff and your board to review the policy on an annual basis, generally in the beginning of the fiscal year. We have done so. Staff has reviewed this. We have gone to Finance Committee, submitted our proposed changes to the Finance Committee at their September 30th meeting, and they have forwarded on to your full board for approval. There are 2 proposed changes. The first proposed change is in section 5.01.07, the Investment Advisory Committee. Current policy specifies the committee will consist of the general manager, auditor, controller, and 1 board member of the Finance Committee. We are proposing to replace the auditor controller with the Director of Administrative Services. The other change is the review period, and that shows up in section 5.01.20. The current policy states it will be reviewed in July. We are proposing we just amend that to the first quarter of the fiscal year. Part of the process, part of the reasoning behind this is that obviously the beginning of the fiscal year is very busy post-budget adoption, but it also gives our auditors a chance, an opportunity to review our investment policy when they come in and do their audit. They generally show up in September. We have correspondence with them beginning in August, so that gives them an opportunity to review it and make any suggested changes and bring it back to staff, which brings it back to your board for any approval. So at this particular point, staff recommends that your board adopt resolution 2014, I'm not sure what the number will be, amending the district's financial management policy, policy number 5.01, investment policy. And are there any questions?
Well, we had a brief conversation where I questioned, I think it's a good idea to put it off until the auditors had a chance to review the investment policy, but I'm not sure that completing it, having this reviewed and make a decision on it before the auditor's report, the formal auditor's report comes in, is appropriate. If that's one of the reasons we're waiting to review the investment policy for any flaws or holes or things like that, why not wait until the investment report, and instead of having it be the first quarter of the fiscal year, have the review to take place after the presentation of the formal presentation of the auditor's report.
In the 7 years I have been here, the auditors have not made any comments regarding our investment policy. They do a review, and if there are any comments, I would know about it in early September, and at that point, we could move forward. I understand your concern about wanting to have the board receive a formal review, a formal report from the auditors. In a particular case where perhaps they are requesting substantive changes and it has to come to your board to receive the report, perhaps on those occasions we could look at extending it, but I think that's not the norm. I think that is an exception. And that's why I feel comfortable with using the first quarter. Plus, it allows us to set our investment policy for the rest of the fiscal year.
Now, I understand the reason to have wiggle room. July is immediately after the change of the fiscal year, and if the auditor does indeed review it, but if we're setting this up to respond to questions that the auditor may raise with regard to investment policy, I think we should wait until the formal auditor's report is in place. Otherwise, don't worry about the auditor and just do it as you're suggesting. But I don't think the auditor should be if the auditor is to be the trigger, it should be triggered with a formal report.
It is one of the triggers, not the only trigger.
Okay. I'm done.
Any other comments, questions? Any public comment on this item? Any action?
Need a motion? I'll make the motion. Approve.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Already asked for public comment. We got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Meyer. You're going to remain there for 6B. Discussion action regarding approving agreement with Burke, Williams, and Sorensen, LLP, for legal services for foreclosure proceedings.
Thank you, Mr. President. The item before you today is approving an agreement with Burke, Williams, and Sorensen for legal services for foreclosure proceedings under the Improvement Bond Act of 1915. As you're aware, we have a number of assessment districts out there and bonds associated with those assessment districts. It is the district's responsibility to help manage those districts as far as administering the collection process through Willdan Financial, and also if it comes to the need, foreclosure counsel for those particular properties that have not paid their assessments. In the past, we have used for many years Sherman Feller out of Oakland. Susan Feller retired, and we did an extensive review of the potential foreclosure counsel firms out there. Several years ago, we chose Burke, Williams, Sorensen, and came to your board for approval. Just recently, their lead attorney on these cases had to take a retirement and is no longer in the business. So what they have done is re-evaluated and reassessed whether or not they want to stay in the business of providing foreclosure services on assessment districts. It is a very unique and specialized service. There are not many law firms that handle this within the state. I can probably count them on one hand. What they have done is it proposed a new agreement that changes both the billing process and the amount of cases that they will handle. The billing process under Sherman Feller has always been contingency. They billed once they received the funds that came back in. No firm does that anymore. In fact, we had a little bit of a modified version with Burke, Williams, Sorensen previously, but what they're doing now is like most legal firms, they bill for services when rendered. So instead of paying for legal services when they collect and deducting that legal service cost from the total collections, we are now paying in advance and then getting the full collection. Any legal services that are encumbered here and billed to the district are actually billed to the assessment district. They pay for these costs. In addition to that, if a particular property incurs legal costs, that property owner must then pay for those legal costs as well. The assessment district is not responsible. It falls on the shoulders of the individual property owner. So if it goes into foreclosure, their legal costs just add to what the property owner must pay. So there is no cost to the district in this. It's just a matter of timing when it comes to the invoicing. The other point here is Burke, Williams, Sorensen is trying to determine whether or not they want to stay in this business. The attorney that they have assigned to this is very enthusiastic about it. He has the prior attorney's full staff, which is very well experienced in these matters, and usually the staff is the one that handles most of the business. So his job right now is to prove that he can create business and be profitable for the legal firm, which any legal firm obviously is interested in doing. What they have done at this particular point in time is identified the current cases that are under foreclosure review, and they will work through these cases. If they find that this particular practice is profitable and they want to continue, the attorney has assured me that they will expand our agreement to have more cases, any new foreclosure cases that come into play. Foreclosure is the last resort for any assessment district. If they're delinquent on their property taxes, it then goes to Willdan. They will send delinquency notices, reminder notices, and then if they find out that in itself is not successful, they will strip the property from the tax rolls and forward it on to a foreclosure counsel. And again, foreclosure is the last resort for collection here. The question came into my mind is why don't we go out and look for somebody who can handle all our services now, just in case we don't happen, and this firm, Burke Williams Sorensen, does not want to continue this business. Well, there's costs associated with identifying a new firm. I've looked at them. It's basically the same firms that I looked at last time. And so this Burke Williams Sorensen kind of rose to the top. Plus, they're already familiar with all our cases. If we bring a new firm in, those attorneys have to get up to date with our cases, which will cost the assessment district even more. So it is my recommendation to the board to approve this agreement with the new billing process, which is pay for services as they are rendered, and also go through the current list of foreclosure properties and work with them and hope that they turn this interim business into a full-fledged foreclosure business again.
It's my understanding that this is our obligation when we sold the bonds, that we would be the ones that would oversee the foreclosure process. This isn't something that CCWD is getting profit from. And I'm asking the question if I have the right frame of mind here, but the whatever fees associated will be taken away from whatever monetary amount is received, and then the balance goes to the bondholders.
This is correct. And it is our duty and our obligation under the 1915 Bond Act.
Right.
Bob,
Yeah.
and Don.
On attachment A, the dozen properties that are listed on the back, is that what they're currently working with?
Yes.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, on all these foreclosures, what percentage of the money is actually collected and what just goes off into the ether?
It varies by assessment district. Our least successful foreclosure processes are 8604 on some of those that have high principal and low property values.
Okay, so
But
basically,
all the others,
But
they're working.
the answer is 100%.
Eventually, yes.
I mean, but we don't necessarily put them, as I understand it, we won't take them to sale if we don't think that they will recover the amount that at least where the charges will be. Because we have the option of when we can bring them to sale to see if they have value. And I'm curious from this list as to how much of this you think actually has recoverable value that the bondholders will benefit from. Because people need to understand, when we're talking about assessments that haven't been paid, the people who aren't getting, the district doesn't make up that money. That property was encumbered, and this is the deal. You don't pay your assessment, the bondholders paid for the improvements as an investment. We're just kind of the overseers of the deal. When the assessment district goes into default, it's the bondholders who get caught holding the bag, not the district. We do have obviously staff time and things of that nature that we have to deal with, but we don't pay that debt out of any fund that we have. That debt is paid by the landowners who encumbered the debt.
That is correct.
and do we recover then our own expenses for managing that?
We have an admin fee that goes towards, that we can collect, but for the most part here, the work is done by Wildan and by the foreclosure council.
Okay, so basically what's going to happen is either the assessment district or CCWD will put the money up front until it's collected. In other words, these people are going to be billing as they incur expense.
Billing to the assessment districts.
Okay, Don and Dennis?
I realize that this Burke, Williams, and Sorensen, they're doing all the heavy lifting, but I'm kind of curious, like Bob's question, is incremental cost to CCWD, do we have a formula for billing back that time?
There are admin costs associated with the assessment districts that are there. We have an opportunity, and that's built into the assessments. So we do have an opportunity to collect some funds if we do wish. For some of the earlier assessments, no, they were not set up that way. And the ones that we're looking at foreclosure, 8604, we actually stopped collections on those quite some time ago, but by law, you have to extend the collection process for 5 years to make sure you give the best effort possible to these to the bondholders to recover their funds. and we're in the 4th year of that now.
Is that assessment district closed?
There are no longer collections as far as the assessments on property taxes.
So we have 5 years after the time of, when did that?
September 2011 was the last collection, or payment. And we've already we had collections, we've made payments to the bondholders, and we're working that through. And in response to your earlier question, we take the fiduciary responsibility of the bondholders very seriously. We will not spend money unless we know we can recover it. There are some property owners here that are in bankruptcy court, and they've already got an agreement, and they're making payments through bankruptcy court to the assessment district. There are some property owners that have agreements with Burke Williams Sorensen to make payments, and they're working on those, and those payments include any penalties, interest, or legal costs. So the assessment districts will recover their funds.
I remember very clearly the 604 assessment, and the monies we spent on that way over and beyond what was in the reserves. And if we have a similar situation, because I've had some conversations with, I think it was with you and with, I think, June, and whereby if we have a situation where there are no more reserves in the fund, and we have a collection, and we're not really optimistic that we are going to get a positive outcome on it, then do we have the legal authority not to pursue it?
That's a very good question. I don't have the answer other than the fact it is our obligation to pursue all collections as best to our ability. 604 is very unique, and I think we all understand that. It is not the norm. In fact, unfortunately, it's been a case study for bond counsels and foreclosures. we
No
are-
doubt.
So
It's what
I'll leave it at
got me
that.
here.
But in a short answer, we have to represent the bondholders and in the assessment district. And any costs for any collections, whether it's in reserves or such, fall on the shoulders of the property owners. And we will not make any reckless proposals or expenditures unless we know that we're going to collect on behalf of the bondholders.
Well, and I think the answer is yes. I mean, we probably need to get that conclusive effort. Now that there's no longer any payments going into the assessment district, I wonder how long we have, because the remaining properties in 604 are landlocked. They might have a couple of assessments or something on them, and they're fairly unbuildable. You know, probably only valuable to the adjacent property owner. I would assume that's still the only thing that's left out there. So we probably need to find out if we are obligated to foreclose on those properties and put them on the market, or if we can still make the judgment, because I don't believe we would have to make up the difference. If the cost to foreclose on the property is greater than the value of the property, I don't believe the bondholders are going to want us, because they're not going to send us a check, and I don't believe we're required to send them a check from CCWD. It has to be receipts from the foreclosure or from the sheriff's sale. Foreclosure and sheriff's sale are two different things. Before we foreclose on them, then we decide if we're going to bring them to sale. Is that right?
Right. And in answer to your question, I have had numerous conversations with the prior council. And we had started to develop a strategy on those that we knew we were not going to be able to have extensive collection opportunities. And she did say, although I don't get quoted in what the codes are, the legal codes are, that it is our responsibility to pursue it as best we can based on financials, which you mentioned.
At the very least, we need to do these foreclosures.
Right.
And then, depending on when, I mean, the sale is another matter, I guess.
Yeah. There are several properties there that The amount owed is in excess of the value of the properties, and several properties that we've also had failed sheriff sales. Nobody's bought them because of the cost. So when we document the processes that we have gone through for collections, she said that basically what you're doing is you're making your best effort, best faith effort, to be able to make collections, and on a monetary basis, you are making your decision what's best on behalf of the bondholders.
So they have to sell for the assessment amount, or does it have to go like that once and then they just go up and then you whatever? Because most of these properties are not just encumbered by the assessment district. If they haven't been paying the assessment district, they haven't been paying their property taxes most likely. So there can be an abundance of liens on the property.
There are, and there's also interest, penalties, and everything else. And as you mentioned, some of them are landlocked and basically have zero to no value, little value. What we're going to do at this particular point is identify what is the best value, because there are costs associated with the sheriff's sale. And there are other people who jump on as well. I mean, we've had several properties where there's been a sheriff's sale that we haven't been the lead on, that we have gone back and said there are assessments here that we need to collect as well. It's a case-by-case basis.
I got, follow up on this. We had in 604, and I realize that we hopefully will never get into another situation like that, where you have all the individual, we were dealing with, I think, over 20 different property owners and numerous lots, and they oftentimes threw out frivolous challenges to the legal action that cost usually 6 months at least on each one, and they usually had 3 or 4 ready to go once one failed, and each time it cost us a couple $100,000, and we couldn't settle. We could not get approval. I think at that time the law may have been changed, but we couldn't get approval to sell a lot for less than all the various fees that would be piled onto not just the assessment, but everything else, and which oftentimes drove the bid value, minimum bid value, way above the property value. And we had to get, I believe, a 75%, I'm not real sure of the percentage, I believe it was 75% acceptance from the bond holders, the bond owners, to sell for less than the assessed, or the minimum value, and we never could. We get, I think, come close to it, but never quite got it, which drove the costs up. Now, I'd like to see, we have to have a bond counsel, of course, but I'd like to see it address how CCWD is obligated to go into a collection where there's not much chance of getting the minimum value that we need. And I have a hard time understanding a lot of this legalese, and but I'd like to see those things addressed in this contract before we sign it.
The advice would come from our foreclosure counsel as to how far the district has to go to incurring costs on these
Which
districts.
is identified in the 1915 Bond Act.
Yes. AB 604 is an anomaly. What we're doing, and I was not here at the time, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there was a lot of unimproved lots in those in that.
There was 75% of the lots that were generated. When I say lots, they were equivalent single-family dwelling unit, a measure of that. And 75% of them were owned by 3 or 4 property owners. So as soon as the economy went bad and the development opportunities went, then because those 3 didn't pay, than the rest of, the regular folks out there that just wanted to get a few connections here or there. The whole mess went into default, because when 75% of the assessments don't pay, and it was only 3 or 4 guys, then you go into foreclosure. That was the big mistake.
And under the current assessment districts that we have multiple property owners. And most of the homes that we have out there, the properties, have improvements on them. And so I don't anticipate any similar type of
That was a
action.
speculative assessment district, and it would be, I don't think that those are highly funded anymore, like they were back then. This is the 90s, 89, 90. It was a similar real estate crash as we just had. It's very similar, as a matter of fact. Calaveras County economy went to hell, and all the development and building went with it. And this just happened, a year before all that went down. So.
And if you look at this list, we're also dealing with multiple assessment districts here. Multiple assessment districts that we're dealing with. So it's a small, very small number of properties that we're dealing with, especially in relationship to the outstanding debt for each assessment district. Most of the issues are handled through Wildan with reminder note letters and delinquency letters.
Well, I'll make a motion that we adopt this resolution approving the agreement with Burke Williams Sorensen LLP for legal services and foreclosure proceedings for the Bond Improvement Bond Act of 1950.
Second.
A question before. Have we done any local search to find out if there's any attorneys in this area, hungry ones especially, that would pick up this project as opposed to going out of the area?
I did that, I've done it twice. The last time was when we initially hired Burke Williams Sorensen. And the closest one that I found that actually had any experience was in Saratoga. Sherman Feller was out of Oakland.
Yeah.
They're just real, this is a very, very specialized type of service.
And as you've previously stated, these guys already have a little bit of knowledge on our, on these properties, wouldn't have to be brought up to speed at $230 to $275 an hour. And
That is correct.
Okay.
And sometimes distance doesn't really matter because they develop relationships throughout the state and dealing with the different county agencies. It's just a matter of expertise.
Okay, we got,
The support staff is very well qualified.
excuse me.
Sorry.
We have a motion and a second. Any public comment on this item? 6B? Okay, seeing none. We've discussed it up here. Got a motion and a second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Got 4 to 1, Stacy with Dennis.
And I'd like to say, I'm for doing this, but I'd like to see some more wording to assure the district's protection.
Noted.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Okay, moving on, 6C, in new business, discussion action regarding Blue Lake Springs Mutual Water Company's well development and impacts to CCWD property. Larry Diamond.
I think the board's aware that Blue Lake Springs has been looking at a number of additional well sites to augment their water supply. And this agenda item is just to give the board an opportunity to discuss the issues related to CCWD property interests. Dave Hicks, GM from Blue Lake Springs, is here to answer questions and help our discussion along. I wanted to start with the well located on the Lucia property. That's a piece of land located up behind the Moose Lodge, adjacent to CCWD's White Pines property. And there's an attached map to show you the general location where that is. Blue Lake's going to have a PG&E line run into power their well pumps on that property, and that power line will have to run across the district's property in some fashion. Dave's asking for clarification from PG&E just how that's going to work, but there's an existing PG&E power line run. If it follows that same alignment, I don't see any further encumbrance on district property interests, and that would simplify things, but we have to wait till Dave gets some answers from PG&E on just exactly how they want to reach out to the wellhead. There's also a little piece of new pipeline off in a corner that's crowded with pipelines. As you can see in the drawings, appears to have very little impact on district property. We're going to run the new 3A pipeline probably out and around that cluster of stuff to stay away from it all. And talking to Charles when he was here, he says we're going to try and go out and around instead of through. You can see we kind of touched the corner of the Lucia property with existing CCWD transmission line that we're going to replace. So we're going to try and avoid further entanglements there, and we're really not asking for any additional action on this new piece of Blue Lake pipeline that's going to be a simple reconnect to their existing pipe that's already there in that corner. You may recall that a few months back, Blue Lake Springs drilled a kind of a test well out there in the area of the barn maintenance yard, and it didn't result in anything that they wanted to further develop, so they properly abandoned it. Currently, Blue Lake's asked to potentially go back and revisit that site, but I think, Dave, Blue Lake's having second thoughts on whether to go back there at all?
Yes, well, there were some issues with we drilled the well down to 700 feet. We got about 35 gallons a minute, or 30 gallons a minute, and at that time, we felt that wasn't enough to develop the well. So then we drilled 6 more wells in the White Pines area on other properties. And we got a little experience and from depths and, we thought, well, maybe we could revisit that well and drill deeper and perhaps pick up some water. So that's why we went back to Larry and asked to be able to do that. Well, since then, it turns out that where that well is located, there's an issue with that's kind of where you guys dump your, the vac-on trucks, or it's dumped near that old well site that's abandoned, so.
There's a holding pond out there for some of the wastewater.
We can't go back there, so we would have to move. And the easiest place to move without moving dirt or anything, not impacting CCWD property, would be to move towards the Moose Hall, where we have this Lucia well is already there. And so we're just debating on whether we even want to drill there because of the proximity to the Lucia well, that the wells may influence each other. So we're still debating on whether or not we want to actually drill. But what Larry brought up is that if we did do that, how would CCWD look at that well? I mean, in previous agreements we've had with CCWD, you guys had co-ownership of our wells with us on CCWD property.
The first 2 original wells.
The first 2 original wells. And so what I would ask is that if we do decide to drill there on CCWD property, that we would continue on with the same co-ownership of that well. We would do all the maintenance. As in the previous agreement, we would maintain the well and be responsible for repair and everything else to the well. And going on past experience with our wells 1 and 2 and 3, which will be brought up later in this, but out at White Pines, our wells have very minimal impact, if any, to CCWD property. I don't think you guys have got any complaints from
No, I don't believe so.
anyone about our wells. We have done all the maintenance, repair, and so we would ask that if we do drill a well another well on CCWD property that we could have an arrangement where it would be co-owned. And we would just take care of it.
So this, Dave, this would be well number 4? Is that, we're going to talk about well number 3 site in a few minutes here. Well
Yeah.
number 1 and 2 have been in production for quite a while. This would be number 4.
This would, I guess it would be considered, well,
However you want to number them, Dave.
how I would say it.
There's a lot of other attempts in between, but as far as,
On CCWD property, it'd be number 4. We did drill a number 4, and Larry knows, but it was destroyed. It's up by number 3,
okay.
but it's destroyed, but it's up there.
Right.
Anyway, so I guess you could say this would be number 4.
So Blue Lake was looking for some clarification on the potential terms and conditions of use for CCWD property and water because they are in the position of evaluating potential site development costs. In other words, is this going to be worth their while? So that's an issue for discussion. Do we, and are we premature, Dave, in going too deep into these sorts of issues if you're not committed to the site, or do we need to cross this threshold
Well,
before you have a decision to
I
make?
think we ought to, as long as we're here, we could get it discussed so that we would know if we decided. I mean, it might make a difference. It might make the difference.
What are we discussing? Because it doesn't seem like we're discussing the agenda item. Seems like we have a new one.
We're circling the agenda item, and what I was looking for from the board was a consensus on 2 options for addressing Blue Lake Springs' use of the new well site, and more specifically, drilling a well within the White Pines Barn courtyard, the maintenance yard there. They may not be adjacent to the one that was drilled and abandoned, but let's say just within the courtyard area on CCWD property. I put out 2 options. One is to go along the lines of what we did with wells number 1 and 2 and have co-ownership of the facilities between CCWD and Blue Lake with no charge to Blue Lake for use of the well site. Or Blue Lake would be the sole owner of the facilities, and we would negotiate some kind of terms for land and water use.
We've had a really, really good working relationship with Blue Lake Springs. They've been a good partner in my mind up there. There's one thing that I want to make sure that everybody recognizes is this is a mutual water company that we're doing business with. It's not a government agency. It's no different than Walmart or anybody else as far as a company that we're kind of co-partners in. And that's loose just by virtue of how it took place historically. It's almost back to the days of handshake kind of stuff, agreements. The board has, at Blue Lake Springs, has gone from being our best friend to being very frustrated with CCWD to the point where we're not as close of friends as we were in the past. And it's gotten to the point where we could foresee some serious issues coming in the future with Blue Lake Springs. I'm all about treating Blue Lakes just like a regular company. CCWD has to have really good agreements. It needs to be really clear what our responsibilities are and how this could affect us in the future in terms of doing business with other companies, so that we aren't setting precedents that could haunt us into the future. I know we're always trying to do things that don't create problems for us in the future. So I'd like to keep this very, very legal, treat everybody the same, and make sure that we can continue to help support Blue Lakes, but do it is in the best interest of our ratepayers. So that's my own personal feelings regarding Blue Lake Springs and how we do business in the future. I want them to be very, very successful. I just want to make sure that we protect our ratepayers as much as we possibly can.
Dawn, have you commented on which one of these, in your opinion, would accomplish, or where are you going with your thoughts? We got one or the other there. One or two is what's on the table to discuss.
I'm more in the mode of keeping everything clean. The concept of partnerships is really good as long as everybody decides that it's the same thing. The moment that we are co-owners, I start to get a little bit nervous in terms of, right now, they're taking care of business, but 10 years from now, are they going to say, well, you're a half owner of this facility, we expect you to cough up money in order to take care of this. Now, I think you can have a co-ownership with really tight, clear agreements, but we can't be casual about this in the slightest. It's got to be crystal clear what the responsibilities of CCWD are going to be going into the future.
Bob?
Yeah, were you finished, Don?
Yeah.
What kind of well tests have been done on the existing wells? What's the drawdown, recovery? Gallons per minute, stuff like that?
Existing, well, the ones we're using now,
That'd be 2 and 3,
Yeah.
right?
that would be 2 and 3. Yes, they're doing very well. They're down a bit, but we didn't have to come to you guys for emergency water. We made it through the summer. Our shareholders are conserving a lot, actually 27% last month. And so the well situation is a matter of recovery now. We're getting to our recovery stage. We're about 40 feet above our intake on well 3, which is the White Pines well out there. And we see no problem with water through the end of the year. Now, we don't know what kind of winter we're gonna get, and we don't know how that's gonna affect the well, but we'll just have to monitor that, and we're also looking for other sources of wells, other wells, and so I'm, as long as conservation goes on, we're in the middle of a drought, and we're continuing to try and increase our supply.
Okay. Next question is, what's the proximity of the proposed new well to the already existing wells? I mean, they're going to be drawing from the same aquifer?
Well, that's the thing that we'd have to look at. When we previously drilled, we did not detect it being in the same aquifer as well as our present wells. But that was, when they're drilling, they're pushing air down there and water's coming out, and you will measure drawdown in the other wells, but the other wells, it may not necessarily show up. You really need to do a pump test.
Well, I understand that. I'm concerned that, you're just putting another straw in the same glass. But, that may or may not be the case until you actually do the work. What's our emergency water supply for the Abbott's Pass area?
In what sense? When
Well,
Stanislaus
if
is not
our
available?
system goes down, the tunnel collapses, we have another landslide, where does our water come from?
Well, typically, when we have our scheduled shutdown in October, we flip over to UPA, purchasing water from UWPA.
And of course, if they're tapped out. Here's where I'm going with that. They're drilling a well on our property.
Yeah.
So historically, as I understand groundwater law, it's a property right. And my sense is that we should own the water in the well. We could make a relationship with, and the kind of agreement that Don's talking about with Blue Lake Springs, where they incur expense to drill that well. If they tap into it, they're using our water. We create a favorable business relationship with them, where we're selling them the water and they can then recoup their costs on the drilling of the well, but at some point in time in the future, the ownership is recognized as being ours. And that ultimately, I think, could be possibly a secondary emergency source of water for us. And there would be no question about who owns what. And the kinds of agreements that I'm talking about would be based on sole proprietorship of the water, and whatever kind of relationship can come from purchasing water. And of course, any expense incurred by Blue Lake Springs in this process would have to be obviously factored into the cost of whatever water charge there would be. But it's a very, very fuzzy relationship when we have co-ownership of something on our land. For me, it would be much cleaner, and there would be no issues about, well, you know, I put money into this, I want to get a return. That has to be factored into any kind of a business agreement that we would have, so that they're protected. I'm very much interested in their protection. I'm also very much interested in their being able to have a water supply. Yet at the same time, I don't really like the slush and the fuzzy relationship that exists because of the issue of ownership of the water. I think it's just a lot cleaner, it's a lot simpler to understand, and I think it's a lot easier to make an agreement that would be favorable to both parties. But I also see it as a potential emergency supply for us at some point in time in the future for wherever required.
In the early 90s, we did have some water supplied into the Ebbets Pass system from wells 1 and 2.
That was in a previous drought that we worked together with you guys and came up with the wells and treatment plant, which you also own half of, or the treatment plant, to help each other out and during the drought, because our wells at the time were failing. And so we did the joint cooperative measures with you guys to drill the wells we're using now, plus the treatment plant, pipe it, and that was in a previous drought. And now we're back into another one that could be pretty serious. So I would like to continue this relationship on, and as Bob said, you know, maybe we won't have a lot of water, but we could be in an emergency situation, we could help out.
Mr. President?
Joe?
I have a couple comments. I just did a little bit of figuring at, you know, it is just a 35-gallon minute well. I mean, we're talking about 50,000 gallons a day and 200 gallons per residence. We're talking about 252 houses, or 252 dwelling units. So it's certainly not the answer to anybody's question unless they somehow get into the 200-gallon per minute. I would assume. What's your benchmark? What's a performing well for you?
Oh, well, we're in the process of discovering that, but
Well, no, you must have a demand factor that you know how to.
Yes.
I mean, the way if it were me, I'd be looking for something. I'd take my total amount of lots, and I'd be looking for wells that will handle all of those lots, and at a normal usage.
that's what we're doing. And we still have a ways to go.
Well, how far?
Well, we've got 3 wells that we're gonna develop, and it would be, one, the Lucia well is probably gonna be around 50 to 75 gallons a minute. The other two wells will probably produce another 75 gallons per minute, and that's not enough to supply our whole system.
How many gallons per minute do you have now, and how many gallons per minute do you need for your whole system to operate normally?
Normal operation's about 350 gallons a minute, but that's only for 7 hours a day. The total is,
So that's without storage, there's no storage involved, is that the deal?
we have a lot of storage. We have 2 750,000 gallon tanks for
Okay.
storage.
Well, I have a couple questions regarding that. I mean, first of all, I get into this is a private company. Am I wrong about that?
No, it's a private company.
Private control. So I'm curious, and maybe we can get some information from council. Now, I mean, if I wanted to set up, let's just change the location to La Quintana or Valley Springs, and, you know, if I wanted to set up a business near one of our treatment plants, could I come to the district and say, I want to put a well in your property, and I want you to be co-owners of it, but don't worry, I'll take care of everything. I mean, would that even be possible?
For you, no, but.
Maybe a nice
Well, no, because you're a board member. No, because, right.
Just the me part.
Yeah, if you are not a board member.
Davidson rejected by CCWD.
Yeah, there has to be, we can't gift public funds, obviously, and there has to be some beneficial interest for the district. You know, the argument would be is if we co-own it, we're getting some beneficial interest. I think that's why it was done that way in the 90s.
Well, but
But this one, I don't know.
Here's the thing about the
Yeah.
co-ownership thing. I mean, if we need it, Blue Lake Springs is gonna need it.
Right.
I mean, it isn't gonna double all of a sudden where we're both gonna get an opportunity to have, to share that water. If there's a catastrophe or an emergency, I mean, they're gonna need it, we're gonna need it. It's gonna be, I mean, like Don's saying, I mean, if we can do this, which I'm skeptical because it seems to me it's a gift of public funds. You know, we've already got the Moose Lodge that we're in a terrible, agreement up there. I mean, we've got a million-year lease for $1 every 10 years, whatever it is. We can't get out of the damn thing. You know, I'm skeptical that this isn't a gift.